when I was there, and this was probably the late 70s, one of the times that I'm speaking of. Elvis wasn't there at the moment. He had passed away. This is one of the times I was there. And Vester Presley was taking me around the estate. And, he took me out back, and there was an awning. There's an awning out back at the time. And under the awning was this Jeep. There was also a pink Cadillac. The pink Cadillac was the one that Elvis bought Gladys, which she never drove. She never drove the Cadillac, not once. But he bought it for her. It was a pink Cadillac. And I don't know if you watch these shows today where they restore stuff like, American Restorations or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called, something like that. And now the cars are all restored and the Jeep's restored and everything looks perfect. But let me tell you something. When I was there, it didn't look perfect. The Jeep was a disgrace. And it was from the movie Blue Hawaii. It was destroyed, to be honest with you. It looked like it had been out in the back getting destroyed for like years. I mean, the seats were ripped. The thing was chipped. And it just looked like someone had beat the living, what out of it. And the Cadillac was looking like it had better days. It just, honestly, it just looked rough. Well, yeah, they probably did. Trust me. They drove around that house in the yard, and heck, they were driving in the house, not with cars, but with, different things. And it was like the Wild West around there, man. If you guys ever talk to Lisa Marie, trust me when I tell you, she will tell you that Graceland was like the Wild West, man. They were shooting guns around there and driving stuff through the hallways, and it was just a crazy, crazy, crazy time. What do you care? If something happened, you just fix it. But that was the beauty of it. That really, honestly, was the beauty of Graceland. So if there was a chip, there was a chip. If the carpets weren't right, the carpets weren't right. The racquetball court was still the racquetball court, and the piano was still where the piano was. And frankly, God loved Elvis Presley Enterprises. God loved Priscilla, Lisa Marie, everybody that's in charge over there. I respect each and every one of them. But they should have kept it the same. Shouldn't have changed nothing. Shouldn't have changed a doggone thing. Should have just made it exactly as it was the day he died. And not moved nothing, not did nothing. If this thing was sitting there, all they should have done is just dusted and cleaned, and that's it. Because that's how it was. It should have been a time capsule. And if they needed to build a big room or a big building for all his trophies and all his suits, and they wanted to make something like that, they should have built it. They shouldn't have took the racquetball court and made that into some big trophy museum, which they did. They should have done that. That's my only complaint. If you go to Graceland now, the car looks beautiful, the Jeep looks beautiful, the planes across the street, the hound dogs across the street, the buses across the street, everything's beautiful. It looks like, honestly, it looks better than it did the day he died. They made everything like brand new. They just cleaned everything, made it perfect, restored everything. In some cases, some of the stuff wasn't restored to begin with. It's just like they made it all like the way, they just messed it up. I love Graceland. Don't get me wrong. Graceland, go to Graceland. It's like it should be like your Mecca. I've been there many times, many times. But I'll be frank with you, I haven't been there in a long time. But I've been there many times. Because honestly, I don't want to go back anytime soon. Because I don't really want to see what it's like now. Again. Because, have you ever had something in your life, and let's just say it's a family member or it's a memory, and you remember it the way it was, and if you go back and see it now, it'll ruin it. Like if somebody passed, And you remember them at that moment when they were happy and they were smiling and they were looking at you and they were talking to you and they were telling you what's up and how things are. And they were your inspiration. You don't want to go back and look at it now because it's not the same. And that's how it is with me. That's kind of like the reason I do this. It's an outlet. I don't want to go back. I don't want to see it because it's not the way it was. I understand. I understand. I know. It's okay a little bit. There's one thing I would love to do one time. I would love to take you, or be there, or go to Graceland with you. Even if however it gets done, just so you could be there and I could explain it. The house is still the house. It pretty much is the same. The house is pretty much, if there's nothing else you can do, go see the house. Let's talk about the positives. If there's nothing else you can do, go see the house. Because they didn't really change the house all that much. You still have the front room, you still have the living room, you still have the dining room, you still have the stairways. It still looks beautiful when you walk in. And then you walk back. And then you have the jungle room. The jungle room is still the jungle room. I think I've told the story before, when Vernon was out, he was out shopping one day and he was just out looking at stuff and he ran in this furniture store and they were selling all this African furniture. And Vernon thought this was the most hideous stuff he had ever seen in his life. He was like in shock and awe of how bad it looked. He was like, man, this is the ugliest crap I've ever seen in my life. I got to tell Elvis about this stuff. He will get a kick out of this. I got to tell him. So he goes home, he pulls in the driveway, parks his car, goes in the house. He says, Elvis, you've got to see this hideous furniture. It is unbelievably ugly. I mean, you got bear claw furniture. This thing's got claws. It's just ugly. I don't even know what to tell you. It's just the ugliest stuff I've ever seen in my life. It's so hideous. Elvis goes, really? Well, we got to see it. So they pile in the car. They go to the store. They walk in. Elvis looks at the furniture. He laughs. And he goes, I got to have that furniture. So he literally buys every single piece of furniture they got that looks like that. And he takes it home to his house. He has it sent to his house. And they put it in the room with this big shag carpeting on the floor. Remember, it's the 70s now. And the shag carpet on the ceiling, which is why the acoustics were good, guys. That's why they recorded songs in there. That's why the last album was recorded in that house, in that room. And that's why Lisa Marie's new album is recorded in that room as we speak. It's got great acoustics because of the shag carpet on the ceiling, the shag carpet on the floor, and the walls you got rock on one wall. It's just a great room to record in, trust me. But, it had a waterfall on the wall, so he needed to put something in that room. And I said it before, Elvis was the first person to build a man cave. He really did. He really was. He was an originator. He was the first person to singing around with his group around him, with, just guitars, with no, metal. He was the first person to, make rock and roll. He was the first person to make a show, when you had a show. Before Elvis, they just stood there with a mic and they stood at a camera and they just looked at everybody. When Elvis came around, he had a show, But anyways, he put all his furniture in there. I actually like it. When I was there, I actually like it. It's just so unique. I can see why Elvis bought it. It's just a lot of wood, a lot of bear claws, a lot of. It's just African. It's strong furniture. But he put it in there, and it was kind of like it was almost like a joke, but it became a serious room afterwards. And like I said, it was the original man cave. That's what it was. Across the street were little businesses, and when Elvis passed away, they opened up shop and they put stuff in there, and it was like Elvis memorabilia store here, and it was Elvis, a studio here, and it was Elvis Pictures over here. And you could buy these little necklaces, and you can buy this TCB, and you can buy this, TLC, Tender Love and Care necklace. You can buy this Taking Care of Business necklace. Whatever it was. They just had it. They just threw it in whatever little buildings were across the street. And when Elvis died, there was just shops across the street. Just normal, like a little plaza. And of course, Graceland bought it all. And bought a big building, and they put it across the street. And that's where you'd go if you wanted to go see a tour. If you wanted to see a tour of Graceland, you'd go into this big building. And you would buy your package for Graceland. And then you'd walk down the plaza where all the people had opened up their businesses and stuff. But if you go there now, it's just like, bam, beautiful. These big shops and these big fancy places and stuff. You got George Klein and the radio show there in one of the buildings. And now, don't get me wrong, I like George Klein. George Klein's cool. Now, if you guys get a chance, if you're ever at Graceland, go see George. George is cool. I like George a lot. George knew Elvis from the time he was in 8th grade. He's known him a long, long time. Actually, George Klein's known Elvis longer than anybody. Anybody that's around today. Since he was in 8th grade. So that would make him about 13 years old. I think he was 13 at the time. And Elvis would be 79 now, so he's known him 66 years. That's a long time, yes. 66 years he's known Elvis. So, if you ever get a chance, talk to George. That man knows any and everything you want to know about Elvis. He is a wonderful person. He is a great person. And he is the most well-informed person about Elvis that's out there. Period. I mean, he was there almost every day. So you're talking about a guy that was with Elvis almost every day from the time he was a kid all the way up to the time he died, and he's still out there. So what can you say about that other than awesome, So, like I was saying, kind of rambling a little bit, but, if you got any questions, or you have, anything that runs through your mind that you want to say, you can go ahead. There's nothing I won't answer if I can for you. There's also a hotel. It's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I love it. And actually, the people who bought, back in 2004, Lisa Marie sold the rights to Elvis's, his image, his music, recordings, movie stuff, 85% of it. I believe the company that bought it is the same company that owns American Idol. She still retains the rights to Graceland, all the memorabilia in Graceland, all the furniture in Graceland, everything about Graceland, all the boxes in the attic and all, whatever. She owns all that. That's not touched. And she will never do anything with Graceland except do what she's doing with it now. So, but this company bought the rights to his image and his songs and stuff, and that's why you see a lot of songs about Elvis on movies and the commercials now, because they're allowed to use it because this company sells it. Yeah, I did give you room prices one night. Well, what happened was, it's not like I got it memorized in my head. I called the front desk, and I asked them what the room prices were that night. Someone in the room said, "Hey, what's the cost to go to the Heartbreak Hotel?" So I called them. Oh, okay, it was good. Yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, I called the front desk, and I said, "What's the room prices?" That's all. No big deal. Yeah, they own the image and likeness, and it's what they ultimately want to do is open up Graceland and make it into like an amusement park. Believe it or not. And I had a discussion with somebody recently. They brought up Little Richard. And Little Richard actually retired from music. He retired from music. He's an older guy, obviously. He decided to retire about a year ago. He said, I'm not doing no music no more. I'm taking it easy. I'm living out the rest of my life. I don't want nothing to do with nothing. I'm just, taking it easy. Just like everybody, they retire at some point. He did. And Little Richard always claimed he should have been the king of rock and roll. He was outspoken about that. He said, I should have been the king of rock and roll. I got robbed. Well, I hate to tell you, Little Richard, and I'm not trying to be mean to you, because yes, you did sing rock and roll, even when Elvis was doing it and before. Right before he did. The difference is, you were only being heard by black audiences. Now, that's not necessarily your fault, but that's the truth. The white audiences weren't hearing you. And at first, even the white audiences weren't hearing Elvis. But see, Sam Phillips was looking for a white guy who sounded black for a reason. Not because he really cared about that, but because he knew it would cross rock and roll over to the white people. I've went into this story too, that Sam Phillips, even though he gets credited for finding Elvis, isn't necessarily the person that found Elvis. Actually, it was his secretary who found Elvis. Marion Keisker, who actually is the person who really should get credit for finding Elvis, is Marion Keisker. But anyways, Elvis was a white guy. He had this, here's what Elvis had. He had good looks. He had the energy. In other words, energy meaning he moved. He didn't stand there. He knew how to move himself, okay? He knew how to get the girls involved. He knew how to get everybody involved. He knew how to get the guys jealous because the girls were dancing to Elvis. And that brought attention to him. Okay? Even though it was a negative that the guys were all jealous because the girls were all hot and bothered by Elvis, it still brought attention to him. And that's a good thing. See, even bad press is good press. But Elvis grew up in Mississippi. When he was a little guy, he grew up in Mississippi. He went to church every week. He listened to gospel music. He sang with the gospel group. He sang in the church. He appreciated gospel music. He listened to Grand Ole Opry. He listened to country music. Ernie Tubbs and the rest of them back in the day. That's why you hear him sometimes make a joke about Ernie Tubbs. Because he listened to them. He listened to them guys, the country people. So he's listening to gospel. He's listening to country. He's listening to rhythm and blues. And he's listening to the blues groups in Mississippi. Because they're there. He's in Mississippi. And they're singing blues. So he's hearing blues singers. Some of the old ones. Way back in the day. The old time guys. So he's listening to blues, he's listening to country, listening to gospel. And here's a good looking white kid who can dance, who can move, he's got the whole package. And as I said it before, and this is a fact, Elvis was the big bang of rock and roll. He brought it all together. Elvis made it what it was. And see, so now what you did is you had the white people taking notice to a song and a group, in a type of music that they wouldn't even listen to before. They're like, oh, that's that black music. I don't want to listen to that stuff. And they just closed-minded about it. They didn't want to just click on the radio. Didn't want to listen to it. It's just nothing I want to hear. So they clicked the radio and they turned it off and they didn't want to hear it no more. And that was it. Now when Elvis came around and they find out from the radio stations that Elvis is actually a white guy, they're like, wait a second, I'm allowed to listen to this. It's a white guy. Now that's completely bigoted, but unfortunately at that time period that's the way people were. And so they're like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. It's a white guy. Now that was the young white people. The young white guys, the young white girls, they were listening to Elvis. And the black people were listening to Elvis because he was singing their kind of music. So that's where Little Richard comes in. He thinks that he should be the king of rock and roll because it was their kind of music. And he's sort of right. It was their kind of music, but nobody else was listening to it, so when it went nowhere except your kind of music would have been heard by your kind of people. Not by everybody. That's where Elvis came in. And Elvis brought all kinds of different sounds into it, not just a one-sided kind of rock and roll. He brought all kinds of it together. So now what you have is you got young white people listening to Elvis, and you got black people listening to Elvis, and they're all appreciating it, but it's not being heard by middle-class white America. The frumpy white people. It's not being heard, you know? And the proof of that, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Elvis got signed to sing in Las Vegas. I think he went to the Frontier Hotel, something like that. I don't know if it was the Frontier or it was something like that. He went to one of the hotel casinos in Vegas at the time, in the 50s. So it's the, mid-50s. They signed him for, X number of shows. He's there. He's going to just blow the place up. He's this big, big star. He's this up-and-coming kid who sings rock and roll music. And he completely bombed. Not because he couldn't sing, not because he wasn't lively, not because he wasn't good. He bombed. Because in Vegas at that time, it was suits, ties, middle-class people, gambling, listening to shows, and they're like, what in God's name is this? And half the shows didn't sell, and before you know it, they canceled the rest of the shows. He bombed in Vegas in the mid-50s, he's out. Then he's doing these TV shows, Steve Allen show, he's doing Ed Sullivan show. He's there on the Milton Berle show. All the shows. He's doing the he's doing the Dorsey Brothers show. He's doing all the shows. He goes on the third appearance on Ed Sullivan show, and he gets done singing. And he puts his arm around him and he says, "This, ladies and gentlemen, I want to just say something about this man right here, this young man right here. This is a good, decent young man. He is a quality person." He goes into a whole description about how good Elvis was, how down to earth he was, what kind of great person he was to the world. He's a great human being, basically. You can all look it up to his exact words. The bottom line was he endorsed Elvis. When Ed Sullivan endorsed Elvis, middle-class white America accepted him. It was over. It was done right there. Ed Sullivan, by endorsing Elvis, made it okay and acceptable for America to endorse Elvis and accept him. And from that point on, Elvis was the king of rock and roll. That was it, right there, that moment. That's the moment it needed. Before that, he was a star. After that, he was a super mega star. Because he was accepted everywhere. Elvis, man, I'll be honest with you. In this regard, I'm kind of like Elvis, in this regard. I don't really know a ton about his movies. As crazy as that seems, I really don't know a ton about his movies. I know a lot, but I don't know a ton about his movies. Elvis didn't know a ton about his movies. He really honestly didn't like most of the movies he made, actually. Yeah, Elvis didn't really like his movies that much. Not because, he didn't do a good job, because he did. Elvis did everything he could for each movie, but honestly, he felt that each movie started to just be the same story over and over and over. There was a girl, he had to sing somebody, just in the middle of it, he'd break into song for no reason whatsoever. And basically, he thought that after about the first couple movies, it just became the same story over and over. And instead of this being this occupation, he was this. And there was no difference. They were all just the same story, just rewrote different ways. And so actually, he started to resent him. But unfortunately, he was under contract for, 30-some movies. But he couldn't get out of that contract because it was stone-clad, and the big douchebag Colonel Tom Parker had, signed it, and Elvis had to live up to it. So That's what he did. Luckily, they let him out of his contract because they did the 2 documentary movies. And so that was a way for him to make 2 more movies that they could sell, where he didn't have to make some stupid movie, that he didn't want to make. I don't know if it's subliminal or it's just from the fact that, I heard it many times, but Elvis didn't like the movies, and so I really didn't have as big an interest in the movies as maybe you guys do. About 1967, right before his comeback special, he told one of his friends, I just don't feel it. I don't think the people feel me anymore. I don't think I can't touch the people. I can't be on stage. I'm stuck in these dang movies, and I'm just tired of it. I want to get out of it. I want to go back to the people. I want to get on stage. I want to see them. I want to feel them. I want to hear them. I got to get back with the crowd. And the guy goes, yeah, I'll be honest with you, Elvis. You really do need to get back with the crowd. Because I bet you could walk down the street right now and nobody would even stop you. And he goes, what do you mean? What do you mean they wouldn't stop me? I'm Elvis. I mean, they don't know who I am. I'm on movies, He's like, no, you don't understand. See, what Elvis didn't quite understand at that moment was, people seen movies back then. They were movie stars. They were in Hollywood. They were on screen. You didn't expect to see them walking out of an IGA in your town. If you're in your town, your small town, wherever you live, and you're walking down the street, you're walking down the street, you don't expect to see some star walk out of the IGA. And if you see someone that looks like a famous person, you're going to assume, oh, that's not him. That's just somebody else. I'll just leave it go. I'm not going to walk up to him. I don't want to be a fool and walk up to him. Hey, Elvis, how you doing? I'm Ben Johnson. Who are you talking to? So you don't say nothing. And so Elvis assumed that, I'm Elvis. They're going to know exactly who I am. So I'll take you up on that bet. So they went out one day, walking down the street, again, walking down the street. Nothing. Nobody stopped him. Nobody stopped him at all. He literally walked down the street. Nobody stopped him. Nobody. See, they didn't assume that it was Elvis Presley. They're probably like, "Honey, is that? Just keep walking, Bill. Come on, that's not Elvis. Elvis is in Hollywood making movies. He ain't here. That's not him. So they assumed it wasn't him. He lost the bet. But at that moment, what it did is it told him he needed to get back with the people. So he went to Colonel Tom Parker. He said, we got to do something. We got to do something. Right around that time period, he was involved in all the movies. He was getting really tired of it. So that's when that all took place. So in 1968, Colonel Tom Parker, thank goodness, it's about the only thing he did good, came up with the concept for the 1968 special, which put Elvis back on the scene. And that got Elvis back in the swing of things. The people seen him. He was on TV. He's still a vibrant rocker. He's still this good-looking, leather-clad guy singing music. Rolling Stones magazine still said he had it. And then that was important at the time. Not that I'm a fan of Rolling Stone magazine, but at the time, there was some weird different groups out there. I don't know if you heard of this little known group called the Beatles. They were out on the scene, and they were taking the world by storm. So when Elvis came back out as this guy who had been out of music for like 9 years, 8 years at that point, in 68, they're like, he's really good. He's still got it, man. You guys really need to take hold of this guy again. This guy's really still about. He's still vibrant. He's still necessary. So they wrote a big thing about how the 68 special was so good, and that helped a lot. It did help a lot. I will give credit for that. And then he decided when they were going to open up the International Hotel the guy who bought the hotel, who was building the hotel, the International Hotel, he knew that he had one star in mind when he opened up this hotel casino, that he wanted Elvis. So he contacted Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis, and they came to the conclusion that this was a good way to break back out into the scene with the people, which he did. You guys know he did. That's the truth. And as I said earlier in the evening, you know, he had flopped. Like I said, not because Elvis wasn't a great singer, not because he wasn't performing great, like I said, and not because he wasn't, you know, as good and great as he always was, but it's just the people in Vegas at the time were middle-aged, old, for the most part, white people, middle-class white people, old, you know, people, and rich people. The people who didn't accept Elvis at that time before Ed Sullivan had accepted him, and so to speak. So when he went back to Vegas, Vegas had aged with Elvis. It was younger. Now it was 34, 33, you know, 40, but it was his bracket of people. And it was his audience that was there now. He had aged, and so had Vegas, but it got young. It got aged with him now. It was his age group. He aged, and now he's equal to the group of Vegas people, if you understand what I'm saying. And so now, when he went there and he did his thing, they all accepted him. All the big people were there. You know, the famous people. You know, Cary Grant was there. You know, he came backstage and talked to Elvis. You know, the Rat Pack was there, you know, hanging out with him. Sammy Davis Jr. talked to him before the show and after and all that. And a lot of the stars came up to him and wished him well. And, you know, it was the big thing. I mean, he was the new, and he was the big thing. It was funny because he was the new thing, but he was actually the old thing, if you know what I mean. But yeah, Elvis's audience now loved him, and he just blew the roof off the place. They opened up the International Hotel, which later became the Hilton Hotel Casino, which is what it is today. And Elvis is the performer there. Now, Elvis knew that he couldn't sit there with some suit and tie or dress like he did in the movies, which he didn't. He needed something that separated him from the rest of the performers. Because when it's all said and done, he's Elvis. He's got to be different. He's got to be who he is. So he decided, and this is why he decided, believe it or not, he had spoke in the past to Liberace. Liberace, of all people. And Liberace told him, you know, son, Liberace, to be honest with you, really liked Elvis. He liked Elvis as a performer, but he also liked Elvis, if you know what I mean. But Liberace was talking to Elvis, and he said, you know, if you're going to do a show, you got to do a show. You got to make it bigger than life. You got to, you know, you got to give the people an experience. You got to be flamboyant. Well, we all know that Liberace was flamboyant, but Elvis wasn't quite going to be like that. But he did tell him that, you know, a good look would be if you wore, you know, something that was flashy. And a good look is a cape from time to time. You know, it gives a good, you know, it makes a good look for the final song and the show and everything. And so Elvis put some thought into it. He liked karate, so he liked jumpsuits that you use in karate. And he went to his, you know, person who designed different costumes for him. And they came out with the idea to do the jumpsuits with the sequins and the tassels that hung down. And, you know, at the end of the show there would be a cape, and he'd kneel down and do the whole cape thing. And that was inspired by the talk he had with Liberace, of all people. He knew he had to put a big show on, and that's why he did it. So that's what that was all about. And that's what he did. Now, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's a lot of influences that people don't realize. You know, when you think of something, you're like, man, I can't believe that. Okay, another, guys, another urban legend, that everybody thinks is Elvis dyed his hair black. Elvis's hair was actually lighter blondish brown. But they're like, Elvis dyed his hair black because of his mama, Gladys, because her hair was black. He was trying to emulate his mom. No, that's not true. The urban legend would tell you that's true. And I'm not saying there ain't some truth. There's a little bit of truth to that. He did like his mom's hair color, black. But the reason he did it is because of the people in Hollywood. He liked the look of people like Tony Curtis. He liked Tony Curtis's hair and the way he did his style and everything. He was emulating Tony Curtis's hair and his style. And it was a Hollywood look, and it helped frame your face better and make it look better on film and black and white and the whole 9 yards. So Elvis knew that was the way to go. So that's why he dyed his hair black. Usually, if you really look into it, there's always a reason why. Most of the time, when you hear people talk about Elvis, that maybe they're interested in Elvis. They might know a little bit about him, but you can tell that they read books because they always have the same urban legend of why he did something. Like you could name something, and then you could ask them the question, and they'll give you the urban legend why he did it. And the difference is the fact versus the urban legend. There's always an urban legend, and then there's always a truth. It's usually how it goes. Why did he have his hair black? Well, because of mom. Not truly. Why did he record the first records he recorded? Urban legend, he recorded them for his mother. Partly true, not entirely. Truth be told, Elvis knew that he had some talent. Elvis knew that he could make him, he wanted to be found. He heard of this guy named Sam Phillips in Memphis, Tennessee, Sun Records, who had found a few people. And he thought, if I get in that room and I sing these songs, he's going to hear me and he's going to flip out and he's going to want to sign me. So that was the reason he went to Sam Phillips and Sun Records. Unfortunately, when Elvis got there, Sam wasn't there. Everybody thinks that Elvis was this overnight sensation. He walked into Sun Records, he sang, "That's all right, Mama." Next thing you know, he's getting record deals. It's not true. It's not true at all. Elvis walked into Sun Records. He sang "My Happiness Until My Heartaches Begin." He recorded them for his mom. And usually what they did is they recorded, you paid them a couple dollars. They recorded a song or two on acetate. Acetate is like a way they just recorded a record. They gave it to you. It wasn't going to last that long. And you gave it to people as a gift or whatever you did with it, or you kept it. It's cool to record yourself. Nowadays they got YouTube, or you can go into some studio and for $29.95 they'll record a couple songs for you. Whatever. But back then they put it on acetate. You took it home. You did what you did with it. Those are the actual recordings, yes. But those aren't from acetate. What those are from is what I'm getting into. As Marion Keisker, when Elvis got on the mic. Now, mind you, as I said earlier, Sam Phillips was looking for a white guy who sounded black. That's what he was looking for. Marion Keisker had been told this over and over and over to the point she was about sick of hearing about it. We know you want to hear a white guy who sounds black. Great. When I hear one, I'll let you know. Day after day after day after day after day, same old people standing there with the mic in their hands, staring at the wall, singing songs mundanely, singing like Bing Crosby. No offense to Bing Crosby. But they didn't move, they had no energy, they didn't have anything going for them except they could sing, and they stood there with a mic looking at a wall. Not what they're looking for. It's not going to branch out music. Marion hears this guy, even though he's singing "My Happiness Until My Heartaches Begin," and it's really not like rock and roll. But she's listening to his voice. And as soon as he sang a sentence or two, she clicked on the recorder. Now, the recorder was done for actual recording stars that Sam Phillips recorded for actual records that were actually sold. So as soon as she heard him sing his first couple words, she kicked it on. And that's what you have. That's the actual recordings. When she kicked on the mic, she kicked on the recording. And those are the recordings. The acetate version, it still sounds the same, but the bottom line is, she recorded that. She gave it to him on acetate. He went home to his mom. He gave it to her as a gift. He's thinking, okay, well, Sam wasn't there, but this Marion lady seemed to like me. I'll get a call in the next day or two. 8+ months pass. Finally, after 8 months, almost 9 months, he gets a phone call. Because see, what she did when he started singing is she recorded it, which they never did, but she knew he had something special, so she recorded it. And then when she got done, she gave him his record, his acetate record, and then she said, "Son, what's your name?" He said, "My name's Elvis Presley." "Okay, where do you live?" Took down his address, took down his phone number. Those things they never did. They didn't really care. All they wanted, no offense, but all they wanted was the money. Give them the record and send them on their way. But he had something special, and she knew it. So she wanted his phone number, she wanted where he lived, and she wanted a way to reach him. She went to Sam Phillips the next day or the day after when he came back into the business, and she said, this kid's got it. This is what you're looking for. And Sam listened to it. Listen to these recordings now. And he wasn't blown over. It wasn't really doing anything for him. He said, yeah, the kid's got talent. The kid's good. But I got 1 million recording people that sound like him. As far as them songs. That style. Because on those songs, he's not rocking it out. He's not, it's nothing, it's great now when you listen to it and he's rock and roll, he's Elvis. But it's not like blowing you away. It's a ballad. It's a ballad. And he bumped the mic on the last song, he sang near the end. But, it's still good. It was really, really super good. I mean, come on, let's face it, Elvis was great. But Sam Phillips wasn't blown over. He's like, I've got a lot of people that I got that sound like that. So he put it to the side. 8 months later, he's going, I got to find this person, man, that sounds black. That's white. And she goes, what about that kid from Memphis? What about that kid? That good-looking kid. What about him? And Sam's like, Marion, come on now. He's not what I'm looking for. He's good, but he ain't what I'm looking for. And she goes, give the kid a chance. Just call him in. So, he calls him in. And then the studio performers, the background group was Scotty Moore and Bill Black. Scotty Moore and Bill Black. And they were in-house musicians, as they would call them. They started playing some songs, and Elvis was singing some songs, and they went through 1, 2, 3, 4 songs, nothing. Sam's just like, man, oh man, what is it? I don't hear it. What's Marion here? Finally, I don't get it. What's Marion Keisker here? I don't get it. I know he's good, but I got a lot of good people that ain't making music change. I need something different. I could record this kid, but he's not different. Finally, he said, you know what, guys, let's just pack it up. Let's call it a night. This is enough. And he's shutting down his recording machine. And right then, Elvis looks at Scotty and Bill and he says, let's do this little song I used to do all the time. It's called That's All Right, Mama. And they started singing and they started playing. And all of a sudden, Sam's ears perked up. And he kicked on the recording. And he goes, boys, what are you guys doing? What are you doing, boys? And I was saying, I'm just singing That's All Right, Mama. It's just a song I do. It's something I used to sing. And he goes, I don't know what you're singing, kid, but keep singing it. So he's recording the song, and they finished the song, And Sam Phillips is holding the holy grail of rock and roll music in his hand, because he knows this is it. This is going to change the world. He goes out, and the next day he goes to Dewey Phillips, and he hands it to Dewey Phillips, and he says, "You got to play this kid." And Elvis was told that they're going to play his music on the radio that night. Dewey Phillips is going to play his song on the radio. He gets wind of it. And Elvis was so nervous. He was so shy and so nervous at the time that he literally went to the movie theater. And he was just sitting in the movie theater watching movie after movie. Back then you could buy a movie ticket and just sit there and watch movies. And it would be one movie, you could watch it over and over and over. You didn't even have to leave. And he's sitting in the movie theater. He's just scared. He doesn't even want to hear himself. And his mom and dad are at home, and they're all happy. My son's going to be on the radio. Because back then, if you were on the radio, that's like being on the Grand Ole Opry. You were it, man. So Gladys and Vernon are hutched around, they're huddled around the radio. Dewey Phillips plays it. He turns it off. He starts another song. And he's getting phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call. And I think when it was all said and done, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he played it something like upper teens. It was like 18 or 19 or 20 times he had to play that song during the night. Because people just said, "Can you play that All Right Mama again?" Again, 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 again. Finally, after about the 7th, 8th time they played it, and he calls Elvis's house. And, of course, Elvis ain't there. But Gladys picks up the phone, and Vernon. And they say, "Where's Elvis?" "Well, he went to the movies." "Well, can you get him? Because I want him to come into the radio station. I want him to talk." So he goes in they get a hold of him. They go down to the movie theater. They walk in, and there's Elvis all huddled, all nervous and stuff. And they said, You gotta go. Dewey Phillips wants to talk to you. That song you played, it's just blowing up. People are calling. They want to talk to you. Come on, Elvis. And so Elvis, it's his parents. He respects his elders, so he gets in the car and he drives down to the radio station. Gets to the radio station, and Dewey Phillips interviews him. Asks him some basic questions about himself. Where did he go to school? And, just a little bit about him. What about him and stuff. Basically, the rest is history. That's when it took off, from that point on. Now, like I say, it didn't take off immediately. I've explained to you how it went down the road, and then finally the Ed Sullivan Show and all that. But that's where it started from. That's what took it into that. Scotty Moore and Bill Black were his group at the time. Now, when it started out, it was his group with Elvis, basically, is how it was built. The group with Elvis. And I think it was the Blue Moon Boys, or something like that. The Blue Moon Boys, or something like that. And Elvis Presley. Because they gave themselves a name, the backup group, Scotty Moore and Bill Black. And that's how they toured. Local places, different fairs, different functions. And Elvis's original manager was Scotty Moore. Scotty Moore was his original manager. But Scotty knew that he didn't have what it took to take Elvis to the next level, so he signed off on it, and then another manager took over briefly, and then that manager gave the rights eventually to Colonel Tom Parker. But originally, Scotty Moore was the manager. Eventually they knew that they no longer were going to be able to be with him in that capacity, so later on, years later, he went on his own. Because he was a single artist. He didn't need a backup group, so to speak. Yeah, he was his manager when he passed away, and actually for a couple years he actually managed his affairs until ultimately he was let go because they were legally allowed to fire him. After he had passed away, they were legally allowed in a court of law. He was removed from the ability to be his manager at that point. How long did his mother live? Well, she died in 1958. Yeah. She was young. She was like 46 years old. She was older than Vernon. You know, Vernon was a little younger. And she was 46. She wasn't 42. That's a misnomer. That's an urban legend, as they would say. Yeah, she wasn't 42. She was 46. She died of a blood disorder, actually. Yeah. She died of hepatitis. In case you're wondering. You won't see that listed too many places where she died of hepatitis because, you know, a lot of people think that that's like some bad thing or something. Obviously, anything that kills you is bad. But a lot of the family doesn't like to talk about it. So I really shouldn't have said nothing, but I at least try to be honest with you guys. I don't want you guys to think some lie is the truth or whatever. Okay. The guy that climbed the gate, actually, in I believe it was 1975, this young musician, if that's what you're talking about, went to Graceland. He's a young man at the time. He jumped the gates, or he jumped a wall. He didn't jump the gates, he jumped a wall. And he actually made it all the way up to the door. If you guys have been to Graceland, it's probably, you know, a couple hundred yards to the door, or at least 150 yards to the door. It's a long ways. It's a pretty long ways. He got to the door and he knocked on the door. And they opened the door. It was one of the Memphis Mafia. And they looked at him, and they looked down at him and wondered who the squirrely little guy was. And they said, "Who are you?" You know, because that's their job, you know. And he looked at them and he said, he said, "Bruce. Bruce who? I don't know who you are." He said, "Bruce Springsteen." "Bruce Springsteen? Who the heck is Bruce Springsteen?" He said, "I'm a singer." He goes, "I never heard of you." But anyways, you know, what are you doing here? You ain't supposed to be here. You're supposed to, you know, they were, you know, sometimes the Memphis Mafia got a little rough, you know. Elvis didn't like it when they did, but see, here's the key. Elvis wasn't at Graceland at the time. He was on tour. You know, he was on tour at the time. And they said, "He ain't here right now." So here's Bruce Springsteen and sitting at the door at Graceland trying to see Elvis, who he was a huge fan of. And Elvis wasn't even home. Can you imagine? Because I know how Elvis would have done it, because I've seen it happen too many times. Elvis, when it went to the door, Bruce would have said, "You know, I'm Bruce." "Bruce who?" "I'm Bruce Springsteen." "What do you do?" "I sing." He'd sing. And Elvis would have immediately brought him in the house. For one, Elvis would have wanted to find out if he's true, if he's not lying. And he wouldn't have worried about his sales. He has 14 guys all packing pistols. You know, so what's he worried about, you know? And knowing Elvis, he probably had one strapped to him at the time. So, he wasn't worried, you know. So he would have brought him in the house, and he would have found out that Bruce was a singer, and Bruce was a musician, and he was just getting ready to break loose, and, you know, but unfortunately for Bruce, it didn't happen because Elvis wasn't there. Well, usually they shot the TV when Robert Goulet was on the TV. Now, I won't get into that real quick since you brought it up. The reason he didn't like Robert Goulet, everybody this day goes, "Why didn't he like Robert Goulet? Why didn't he like Robert Goulet?" You know, you gotta say it like that, you know, so you sound like a nerd or something. He didn't like Robert Goulet because Robert Goulet, when Elvis was younger and just starting out, and he had a girlfriend, Robert Goulet took his girlfriend. If you can believe that. And I'd like to ask that girl right now what she was thinking, why she would ever let Robert Goulet take her from Elvis. But she did. And so that's why he didn't like Robert Goulet. It was personal. You know, he didn't like what he did. He thought he was a dog. So, Every time he's seen Robert Goulet, he goes, I hate that son of a bitch. But that's why I didn't like Robert Goulet. Yeah. So, that basically, guys, is the entire story of the situation with Elvis, the estate, what everything came about.